Hi, I'm Dan Pilla. I'm the author of 14 books on dealing with the IRS, and I'm a tax litigation consultant. What that means is I fight the IRS every day. I help people who've got tax problems. I've seen every kind of tax problem you can imagine, and I've seen a few that you can't imagine. And right now I want to talk to you a little bit about what's going on with the government shutdown insofar as the IRS is concerned. There's good news and bad news. The good news is the IRS is shut down along with most of the rest of the federal government. So that means about 60,000 out of the 89,000 IRS employees that are on the job have gone home. And so that means that there are very few IRS people out there harassing our citizens and levying paychecks and levying bank accounts and those types of things. So that's the good news. The bad news, however, is that just because the IRS has gone home doesn't mean your statutory deadlines have been suspended. This is important because before the IRS went out, they still issued a number of enforcement letters. For example, a notice of federal tax lien or a federal tax levy, a notice of intent to levy. These documents carry statutory deadlines for responding. In the case of a notice of federal tax lien or in the case of a notice of intent to levy, the law gives you 30 days to respond to the notice in writing by requesting what's called a collection due process hearing. If you request the collection due process hearing within 30 days, the IRS cannot enforce its levy action, and you are entitled to what's called a collection due process hearing, where you have an opportunity to sit down with the appeals office and present collection alternatives. This is an excellent tool for negotiating a settlement with the IRS. But you lose that right, friends, if you don't respond on time. So I want to impress on you that just because the government is shut down doesn't mean your statutory rights or your statutory limitations, I should say, for responding to these notices are suspended. They are not. You still have to respond within the time required by law. And so what you say, well, how do I do that if the IRS is shut down? You mail your response by certified or priority mail, so you've got a certain mailing date that is recorded on your documents. You get a receipt from the post office. The postmark on your document controls the mailing date. That dictates what the mailing date is. So even though the IRS is going to have a massive backlog of documents when they do get back to work, and unfortunately they are going to go back to work at some point, then they will be able to determine the mailing date by the postmark on the envelope. You need to keep your records of the mailing and the postmark date to be absolutely certain that you responded on time. So keep that in mind. These statutory deadlines are not suspended just because the IRS has gone home. The other thing is, in some cases, they're actually still collecting. There's about 20,000 IRS employees that are still on the job, plus or minus, and some of those employees are revenue officers that are working high-dollar collection cases. A high-dollar collection case is a tax liability that exceeds $100,000. So some of you still may be interacting with the Internal Revenue Service, but even if you're not a person that's getting contacted by the IRS right now, if you're on some kind of a payment plan, continue to make those payments. All right. In particular, even if you're not on a payment plan, even if you don't have a delinquent tax liability, you still have to make your last 2018 estimated tax payment. That's due January 15th of 2019, so about a week from now or so. You have to make that last payment on time. And if you're an employer with employees and you have wage withholding for those employees, you need to make your federal employment tax deposits in full and on time. You have to continue to make your payments. Just because the IRS is not working doesn't mean that your payments are done with now. All right, so now the other thing I want you to keep in mind is the IRS's online payment system is still working. You can go onto their computer and you can make payments to the IRS through the online system. And I recommend you do that. Now, they tell me that they still have physical staff in the IRS's mail rooms in their payment centers, and they're taking checks out of envelopes and depositing them. That's what I'm told, but I don't have any way to know that for sure. The best way to do this is through their online system. So if you have an installment agreement, you want to keep making your payments, and you obviously have to pay your current taxes in full and on time going forward despite the shutdown. The other thing I want to point out is the United States Tax Court is also closed during the shutdown. All right, so that means that they're not staffed there, and their trial sessions have essentially been shut down, and the functions of the court have shut down. Now, that said, that doesn't mean that you get an extension of time on your statutory deadline for filing a tax court petition if you received a notice of deficiency. If you received a notice of deficiency from the IRS, that's a final administrative determination that the IRS thinks you owe them money, and in order to challenge that, you have to file a petition with the tax court. That has to be done within 90 days of the date on the notice of deficiency, and that deadline is not extended just because the tax court is shut down. So again, the date of mailing is the date of filing. Your postmark will control. Make sure you send your document to the tax court by certified or priority mail, and make sure you get tracking with anything you mail to the IRS so you can prove, absolutely prove, the date you mailed it, because that is going to be the date that controls for filing purposes. So don't miss your deadlines, friends, just because the IRS is shut down. Now, I want to encourage you very strongly to get a couple of my books. If you've got a tax delinquency problem right now that you're struggling with, you need to get the book, How to Get Tax Amnesty. That book is the most thorough discussion that's ever been written on how to deal with the IRS collection process and how to negotiate settlements with the IRS. If you're dealing with a tax court situation right now, if you've got a notice of deficiency in hand right now, or you even have a pending tax court case, you need to get my book, The Taxpayer's Defense Manual. That has a great deal of discussion in it on how to work through a tax court case, and it's great guidance that's going to help you resolve your problem with the IRS once and for all. So you can go to my website, TaxHelpOnline.com. That's TaxHelpOnline.com, and order any of my books. And if you order any of my books off my website, you're going to get a free consultation directly with me where I will talk to you personally about your problem. So go to my website, TaxHelpOnline.com.